At 2 a.m., my sister secretly took my credit card while I was asleep. By morning, $15,000 was gone, spent on a first-class trip to Japan and luxury gifts with our cousin. A week later, she came back and Dad said, "Stop acting like she would never touch your money." I just smiled. Little did they know, the card she used was mine to control. Imagine waking up to find your hard-earned financial security utterly destroyed, not by a stranger, but by your own sister, who had slept in your guest room just hours before. The betrayal was gut-wrenching, but the real fight began when my family refused to believe me. My name is Hazel Williams, and at 32, I truly felt like I'd finally made it. Years of grinding, pouring my soul into my career as a financial analyst, and there I was, living in this gorgeous downtown apartment that truly felt like mine. It was the kind of place you dream about. My younger sister, Brooke, who, let's be honest, was always our parents' golden child despite a lifetime of irresponsibility, knew exactly how comfortable my life had become. What I never expected was that she'd wait until I was sound asleep to steal from me. Before that nightmare night unfolded, you have to understand where I came from. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston. My parents, Eleanor and Thomas, worked incredibly hard for us. But even from a young age, it was crystal clear that there were completely different rules for Brooke and me. Brooke, 3 years younger, had this uncanny ability to charm her way out of absolutely anything. Those big blue eyes, that infectious laugh, they were her superpower. When she broke a neighbor's window at 7, an accident, my parents would say, praising her athletic ability. When she failed 5th grade math, clearly, the teacher just didn't recognize her creative mind. Me? I was the responsible one. My report cards had to be perfect. My room, spotless. Any mistake I made was met with disappointment, never the understanding Brooke got. This double standard shaped us both profoundly. Brooke learned she could get away with almost anything. I, on the other hand, developed this intense self-reliance and financial discipline that basically defined my adult life. By 16, I was already working part-time, saving every single dollar for college. My parents said they'd help with tuition, but I'd need to contribute significantly. Brooke? She bounced between hobbies and friend groups throughout high school, never really building any of that discipline. College was my turning point. I went to Boston University on a partial scholarship. I worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, maintained a near-perfect GPA, and landed competitive internships every summer. Those years were exhausting, honestly. But they forged me. I learned to survive on minimal sleep, to budget meticulously, and to never, ever expect anyone else to solve my problems. After graduation, I hit the brutal reality of the job market during an economic downturn. Finance jobs? Scarce. I spent 9 months as an administrative assistant, sending out countless applications. The rejection letters piled up, but I just kept going. Finally, my break came, a junior analyst position at Morton Financial. The pay wasn't great, but it was the opportunity. For 5 years, I climbed. 12-hour days were standard. I volunteered for all the projects nobody else wanted. I built a reputation for being thorough, reliable, and just plain good. Last year, a senior analyst position opened up, and I earned that promotion through sheer grit and consistent excellence. That promotion meant a substantial salary increase. It finally allowed me to buy my dream apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, city views. After years of roommates and cramped spaces, having a place that was truly, entirely mine felt like the ultimate achievement. My financial discipline had also led to substantial savings and an incredible credit score, over 820. That score opened doors to premium credit cards and banking services most people my age could only dream of. My most prized financial asset was my Black Excelsior card. Generous limit, exclusive benefits. I rarely used it to its full potential, staying frugal, but it represented everything to me, financial security, earned through years of perfect credit management. While I was building this career and this financial bedrock, Brooke was on a completely different path. After high school, she enrolled in 3 different college programs, photography, marketing, psychology, over 4 years. Never finished any of them. Each one captured her interest temporarily until she got bored or the coursework got too demanding. Her job history was a carbon copy, retail, restaurant, office admin. She'd start with enthusiasm, then the sick days and tardiness would begin, leading to an inevitable termination. And it was never her fault. The manager was unreasonable. The hours unfair. The environment toxic. Always someone else to blame. Our parents? They just reinforced this narrative. They constantly bailed her out. Rent money, a new car when hers was repossessed, co-signing apartments despite her history of evictions. They called it supporting her while she found her path. I called it enabling irresponsibility. Then, 6 months before everything changed, Brooke was fired from her latest marketing firm job for chronic tardiness. That same week, her boyfriend Jake finally ended their 3-year relationship after discovering she'd been lying about their shared finances. Instead of facing reality, Brooke moved back home and just fell into a cycle of online shopping and nights out with friends. Money for which seemed to just materialize despite her unemployment. Sunday dinners at my parents' house became increasingly tense affairs. My mother would praise Brooke for the smallest things, applying for a job, making dinner once that week. My father would awkwardly steer conversations away from anything that might highlight the growing chasm between his daughters' lives. When Brooke would mention some new purchase or trip she was planning, I'd catch my father wincing, then quickly changing the subject. My attempts to establish any boundaries were always seen as coldness or a lack of family loyalty. 3 weeks before the theft, I refused to loan Brooke $2,000 for what she called business clothes for interviews. That refusal sparked a heated argument at dinner. My mother accused me of being selfish with my success, while my father quietly stared at his plate. "You have more than enough money, Hazel," my mother insisted. "She's your sister. Family helps family." "I will help her in other ways," I replied, my voice tight. "Career advice, resume review, interview prep. But not cash that will just vanish with nothing to show for it." Brooke stormed out, calling me heartless. My parents gave me that look, the one I'd seen my entire life. The look that said, "Why can't you just give in? Why do you always have things difficult?" I left dinner early that night, driving home with that familiar knot in my stomach. The same suffocating feeling I'd carried since childhood. The sense that loving my sister meant enabling her and refusing to do so made me the villain in our family story. What I didn't realize then was that my refusal to provide that loan had planted a seed in my sister's mind. A plan that would target the ultimate symbol of my financial success, my premium black Excelsior card. The one with a $15,000 limit, kept separate from my everyday cards. The card I'd earned through years of perfect credit management. The card that represented everything Brooke had never worked for. The day before the theft was brutal. I was finalizing a massive presentation for a potential client, millions in new business for my firm. The pressure was immense, and my insomnia, a constant companion since college, was worse than ever. I'd been averaging maybe 4 hours of sleep all week, running on coffee and sheer determination. At 7:30 that evening, as I was reviewing my presentation for the 5th time, my phone rang. It was Brooke. Her voice was uncharacteristically small, fragile. "Hazel, I hate to ask this, but I really need a place to stay tonight," she said. "Tiffany and I had a huge fight, and I can't go back to the apartment right now." Tiffany was Brooke's newest roommate, a girl she'd met just 2 months earlier. They'd moved in together after barely knowing each other, a decision I'd warned her against. "Can't you stay with Mom and Dad?" I asked, my eyes flicking back to my laptop, where dozens of financial projections screamed for my attention. "They're at that couple's retreat in Vermont this weekend, remember?" Brooke said. "Please, I promise I'll be gone first thing in the morning. I just need one night." I hesitated. I desperately needed a good night's sleep before my 9 a.m. presentation. But the alternative, my sister, potentially sleeping in her car or calling friends who might not have her best interests at heart. "Fine," I sighed, finally. "I'll text you the address. Use the intercom." I sent her the address, even though I was sure she knew it from my housewarming party 3 months earlier. Against my better judgment, I started tidying the guest bathroom, pulling extra blankets from the closet for the couch. My apartment had 2 bedrooms, but the second was my home office, completely unsuitable for guests. Brooke arrived 45 minutes later, with a suspiciously large overnight bag for someone only staying one night. Her eyes were slightly red, but I couldn't tell if she'd been crying or if it was just allergies, as she claimed. She hugged me tightly at the door, thanking me profusely. We ate a simple pasta dinner I quickly threw together, and she shared fragmented details about her fight with Tiffany. Something about shared groceries and borrowed clothes that didn't quite add up to the dramatic exit she described. Throughout the meal, I noticed her glancing around my apartment, taking in the furnishings and decor with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So, when do you have to leave for work tomorrow?" she asked casually as I rinsed our plates. "I have a presentation at 9, I said. "I'll probably head out around 7:30 to prepare at the office." "You seem stressed," she commented. "Are you sleeping okay?" The question surprised me. Brooke rarely showed any interest in my well-being. "Not great," I admitted. "I've had insomnia this week with this project deadline." "Do you take anything for it?" she pressed. "Sometimes," I said, not elaborating on the prescription sleep aid my doctor had recently given me for occasional use. As I set up the couch with sheets and blankets, Brooke kept asking these unusual questions. How secure was the building? Did I know my neighbors well? Was my bedroom door hard to open if it swelled in humidity? Each question innocent enough on its own. But together, they formed a pattern I was too exhausted to recognize. Before heading to my bedroom, I showed her where everything was. The bathroom, glasses for water, the TV remote. I placed my purse and wallet on my nightstand, as I always did, not thinking twice about this habit despite having a guest. My special black Excelsior card was tucked into an inner pocket of my wallet, separate from my everyday cards. I swallowed my prescription sleep medication with a glass of water, set my alarm for 6 a.m., and collapsed into bed. The combination of a week of sleep deprivation and the medication worked quickly, pulling me into a deeper sleep than usual. Normally, I'm a light sleeper, waking at the smallest sound. That night, though, I was completely unconscious, vulnerable in a way I rarely allowed myself to be. At exactly 2 a.m., according to the timestamps that would later become crucial evidence, Brooke crept down the hallway toward my bedroom. She paused outside the door, listening. Hearing nothing but my deep, medication-induced breathing, she slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. Just enough to see me lying motionless in bed. With careful, calculated movements, she approached my nightstand. She stood there, watching me for nearly a full minute, making absolutely certain I was deeply asleep. Then, with delicate precision, she lifted my wallet from my purse. She took it to the bathroom, closing the door before turning on the light to minimize the risk of waking me. Inside my wallet, she found it, my black Excelsior card. She removed it temporarily, using her phone to photograph both sides, capturing all the details she'd need, the 16-digit number, expiration date, and security code. She even took my driver's license out briefly to record my billing address details. With the information secured on her phone, she carefully replaced the card exactly as she had found it. But she wasn't done. She needed one more thing. Returning to my bedside, the wallet replaced perfectly, she carefully took my phone from where it charged on the nightstand. She knew that large purchases would trigger security measures, requiring verification through my phone. With practiced ease, she used my sleeping face to unlock the phone through facial recognition. Then, she quickly disabled notifications that might alert me to any purchases. She forwarded the verification text to her own number before deleting the forwarding evidence and returning my phone to its charging position. As she completed this last step, I stirred slightly, turning in my sleep. Brooke froze, her heart pounding, until I settled back into stillness. With a final glance to ensure everything appeared undisturbed, she slipped out of my room and returned to the living room. For the next hour, as I slept obliviously, Brooke launched her spending spree. Using her laptop and the photos of my card, she first booked 2 first-class tickets to Tokyo for herself and our cousin, Olivia, departing that very morning at 11 a.m. The tickets alone cost $6,000. Next came a reservation at the exclusive Park Hyatt Tokyo for 7 nights, a total of $3,500. She followed that with online shopping at luxury Japanese brands, pre-ordering items to be collected upon their arrival, adding another $5,500. By 3:30 a.m., Brooke had charged exactly $15,000 to my card, the full available credit limit. She had timed everything perfectly, making the purchases in the middle of the night when I'd be least likely to see alerts, and planning a departure that would have her out of the country before I could fully respond. As dawn approached, Brooke packed her overnight bag and scribbled a quick note on a piece of paper from my own kitchen notepad, "Emergency at Tiffany's. Had to run. Thanks for letting me crash. Love you, Zoxo." She placed it on the coffee table where I'd easily find it, then quietly let herself out of my apartment at 5:15 a.m., a full 45 minutes before my alarm was set to go off. She'd already arranged for a rideshare to pick her up and take her directly to the airport, where Olivia would be waiting, luggage already packed for the adventure Brooke had promised her days earlier. My sister had executed a perfect crime, or so she thought. I jolted awake, not to my alarm, but to the persistent buzzing of my phone at 6:02 a.m. Through blurry eyes, I saw multiple text messages flooding my screen. The first one made my stomach drop. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $6,000 at International Airways. The next messages were equally alarming. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $3,500 at Park Hyatt Tokyo. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $2,800 at Ginza Luxury Collections. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $1,700 at Tokyo Electronics Direct. Excelsior card alert. Purchase approved for $1,000 at Sakura Designer Boutique. Finally, Excelsior card alert. You have reached 100% of your credit limit, $15,000. Gone. In the middle of the night while I slept. My hands were shaking. I sat bolt upright in bed, fully awake now, despite the lingering effects of my sleep medication. This had to be a mistake. I never made purchases like these. I'd never even been to Japan. I immediately called the Excelsior customer service line, my voice cracking as I reported the apparent fraud. The representative was calm, professional, asking me to verify the suspicious transactions. No, I insisted, I did not make any of these purchases. I was asleep. My card is right here in my wallet. I reached for my purse, fumbling to find my wallet. The black Excelsior card was exactly where it should be, nestled in its special compartment. How was this possible? How could someone use my card when it was physically in my possession? As the representative placed me on hold to transfer me to the fraud department, I suddenly remembered Brooke. Brooke. I called out, but the apartment remained silent. I rushed to the living room. The couch was empty. The blankets neatly folded, with her note conspicuously on top, emergency at Tiffany's. Had to run. Thanks for letting me crash. Love you, Zoxo. Something felt profoundly wrong. I called Brooke immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text, please call me ASAP. Important. Back on the phone with the fraud department, I learned the devastating news. The purchases had been verified through my own phone. The system had sent verification codes, which were correctly entered. The billing address used matched my records exactly. Because all security protocols had been properly followed, the representative explained, it will take time to investigate whether this qualifies as fraud. But I was with my phone all night. I protested. It was charging next to my bed. I glanced at my phone settings and noticed something odd. The notification settings for my banking apps had been changed. Text forwarding had been enabled and then disabled. A cold realization began to settle over me. With growing suspicion, I checked my wallet more carefully. Nothing was missing, but I could tell it had been handled. The cards were arranged slightly differently than my usual meticulous organization. My driver's license was in the wrong slot. As I scrambled to get ready for my presentation, now hopelessly behind schedule, I noticed other subtle signs of intrusion. My desk drawer was slightly ajar. The bathroom towel was hung differently than I would have left it. Someone had gone through my things while I slept. I called Brooke again and again, each time reaching her voicemail. I tried Tiffany, her roommate, who sounded completely confused when I mentioned their fight. Fight? What fight? She asked. Brooke told me she was staying with your parents this week because they needed help with some house project. The lie confirmed my growing suspicion. With trembling fingers, I opened Instagram on my phone. The first post in my feed made my blood run cold. It was Brooke. A selfie, clearly from an airport terminal. The caption read, surprise trip with my favorite cousin #Tokyo #first class. She was tagged with Olivia, our 23-year-old cousin, who had always been Brooke's partner in impulsive adventures. The timestamp showed it had been posted just 30 minutes earlier. They were already at the airport, about to leave the country, with my $15,000. In a panic, I called my parents. Despite it being early, my mother answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Mom, I blurted, without preamble, I think Brooke stole my credit card information. She's charged $15,000 and is about to board a flight to Tokyo with Olivia. There was a pause before my mother responded, her voice instantly defensive. Hazel, what are you talking about? Brooke would never do something like that. Mom, I have proof. I insisted, my voice rising. She stayed at my apartment last night, and now there are charges on my card for flights to Tokyo. She's literally posted on Instagram that she's at the airport with Olivia. There must be some misunderstanding, my mother said firmly. Maybe she used her own card, and the bank made a mistake. You know how these financial institutions mix things up sometimes. I could hear my father in the background, asking what was happening. My mother covered the phone partially, but I could still hear her explaining my accusation in a tone that suggested I was being hysterical. When my father came on the line, his voice carried that familiar note of disappointment. Hazel, this is a serious accusation, he said gravely. Brooke has her issues, but she would never steal from family. Perhaps you should check your facts before throwing around allegations like this. Dad, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, I am literally looking at $15,000 in charges to my card and an Instagram post of Brooke and Olivia at the airport heading to Tokyo. What more facts do I need? Maybe you gave her permission and forgot, he suggested. Or maybe you mentioned your card details in front of her at some point. You have been working very hard lately. Perhaps you're not thinking clearly. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. The same knot I'd felt countless times throughout my childhood, when my perception of reality clashed with my family's unwillingness to hold Brooke accountable. For a brief, disorienting moment, I actually wondered if I could be wrong. Had I somehow authorized these charges in a sleep-deprived haze? Had I given Brooke permission I didn't remember? No. I shook the doubt away. The evidence was clear. The timing was precise. This was theft, plain and simple. I ended the call with my parents, promising to update them when I knew more. But their dismissal had shaken me. As I rushed to prepare for work, now definitely late for my crucial presentation, I felt the physical symptoms of anxiety overwhelming me. My chest tightened. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick for an important meeting. I simply couldn't function. The financial violation, combined with my family's instantaneous defense of Brooke, had left me reeling. As I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, watching the Instagram updates of my sister and cousin heading through airport security with first-class boarding passes, I felt a profound sense of betrayal that went far beyond the stolen money. This wasn't just about $15,000. This was about a lifetime of different standards and expectations. This was about a family system that had always protected Brooke at my expense. This was about the searing realization that no matter what evidence I presented, my family would always choose to believe Brooke's version of reality over mine. In that moment of clarity, something shifted inside me. If my family wouldn't help me seek justice, I would have to do it myself. If they wouldn't believe me, I would gather evidence so compelling that they would have no choice but to face the truth. With newfound determination, I picked up my phone and made another call. Not to my family, but to the police. The local police station was busier than I expected for a weekday morning. I sat in a hard plastic chair, clutching a folder containing my credit card statements, screenshots of Brooke's Instagram posts, and the note she had left in my apartment. After nearly an hour of waiting, I was finally called in to speak with Officer Garcia, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a matter-of-fact demeanor. "This happens more often than you'd think," she said after I explained the situation. "Family fraud cases are actually quite common." She took my statement methodically, asking clarifying questions about the timeline and how Brooke might have accessed my card information. When I mentioned that my family was already dismissing my claims without evidence, Officer Garcia nodded knowingly. "Unfortunately, that's also common," she said. "Families often close ranks, even when the evidence is clear. It's hard for people to accept that someone they love could commit a crime, especially against another family member." She explained that because the card was still in my possession and the information had been used rather than the physical card, this would be classified as identity theft, rather than credit card theft. She also warned me that prosecution would be complicated by the family relationship. "You can absolutely press charges," she assured me, "but you should be prepared for family pressure to drop them." I see it in almost every case like this. After filing the police report, I headed directly to my bank. The fraud department representative I met with in person was significantly less optimistic than Officer Garcia. Because the security verification processes had been correctly followed using my own phone, the bank considered the charges provisionally authorized. They would investigate, but it could take up to 90 days to determine whether I qualified for fraud protection. In the meantime, I would be responsible for at least the minimum payment on the $15,000 balance. With my rent due in 2 weeks and several other bills pending, this unexpected financial strain was going to be significant, even with my healthy savings. The knowledge that Brooke was currently flying first class to Tokyo while I scrambled to manage the financial fallout of her theft filled me with a cold fury I had never experienced before. But beneath the anger was a deeper pain. The realization that my sister had so little regard for me that she could steal such a significant amount without hesitation or remorse. Throughout the day, evidence of Brooke's spending spree continued to appear on social media. An Instagram story showed her and Olivia toasting with champagne in their first-class cabin. Within hours of landing, they were posting photos from the Park Hyatt Tokyo, showcasing the spectacular views from their luxury room. By evening, there were images of shopping bags from high-end Japanese brands, exactly matching the charges on my credit card. The most infuriating post came from Olivia, "Best surprise ever from the world's most generous cousin. #Tokyo #shopping spree." The photo showed Brooke and Olivia surrounded by shopping bags from luxury stores, both wearing new designer sunglasses that still had price tags visible in Japanese yen, equivalent to hundreds of dollars. I saved every post, every story, every piece of digital evidence linking them to the fraudulent purchases. I was building a case that no one, not even my enabling parents, could deny. Speaking of my parents, they called that evening. Their tone was markedly different from our morning conversation. They had spoken with Brooke, who had apparently offered them an alternate explanation for her sudden trip. "She says she won the tickets in an online contest," my mother said, her voice hopeful, "and that Olivia's parents gave them spending money as a graduation gift." I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "Mom, do you honestly believe that? When has Brooke ever won anything, let alone first-class tickets to Japan worth thousands of dollars?" "It's more believable than her stealing your credit card," my father interjected. "You need to drop this, Hazel. You're going to damage your relationship with your sister over what might be a bank error." "A bank error?" I repeated incredulously. "Dad, she literally posted photos of herself buying the exact items that were charged to my card. How can you still defend her?" "We're not defending anyone," my mother said, though her tone contradicted her words. "We're just saying you should wait until Brooke comes home to discuss this calmly instead of making accusations and involving the police." When I told them I had already filed a police report, the conversation deteriorated rapidly. My father accused me of trying to ruin Brooke's life over a misunderstanding. My mother began crying, saying she had failed as a parent if her daughters could treat each other this way. Neither seemed concerned about the fact that I had been robbed of $15,000 or that their younger daughter was the perpetrator. After ending the call, I received a barrage of text messages from extended family members. Word had spread quickly. Aunt Susan suggested I was jealous of Brooke's free spirit and adventure. Uncle Robert questioned whether I might have given permission while tired and forgotten. Cousin Taylor wondered if this was all an overreaction to Brooke borrowing my card for an emergency. Only Uncle William, my father's brother, and the financial pragmatist of the family, reached out with genuine concern. "Have you spoken with a lawyer?" he texted. "This is serious, and you should protect yourself regardless of family feelings." His message was the only one that acknowledged the reality of what had happened, and I felt a surge of gratitude amidst my growing isolation. The psychological toll of the situation began to manifest physically. My already problematic insomnia worsened to the point that I managed only 2 or 3 hours of broken sleep each night. I found myself questioning my own worth when my family so easily dismissed my experience. Memories from childhood resurfaced, the time Brooke had broken my science fair project, and my parents told me to be understanding because she was younger. The Christmas she had opened my presents because she couldn't wait for her turn and was praised for her enthusiasm. The countless times her transgressions were minimized, while my achievements were simply expected. My friend Stephanie became my lifeline during this period. She came over after work most evenings, bringing dinner and a sympathetic ear. Unlike my family, she never questioned the reality of what had happened. "Of course she took your card," Stephanie said firmly. "The evidence is literally on her Instagram. Your family is in denial because facing the truth would mean acknowledging they failed somewhere along the way." Stephanie's clear-eyed perspective helped me maintain my own sanity as the gaslighting from my family intensified. With her encouragement, I continued methodically gathering evidence. I documented the timeline of events, secured copies of the transaction records, and compiled screenshots of all social media posts connecting Brooke and Olivia to the stolen funds. I also reached out to my law school friend, Derek, who specialized in financial crimes. He reviewed my evidence and confirmed what I already suspected. I had a strong case for criminal charges against my sister. "But are you prepared for what that means for your family?" he asked gently. "Once you go down this road, relationships change permanently. Some never recover." I thought about his question for a long time. Was I ready to potentially fracture my family beyond repair? Was justice for this theft worth the possibility of permanent estrangement from my parents? Did I have it in me to send my own sister to court, or possibly even jail? The answer came to me while watching yet another Instagram story of Brooke and Olivia enjoying an expensive sushi dinner, laughing without a care in the world. What hurt most wasn't the money, though that was significant. It was the complete lack of remorse. The absolute absence of consideration for how her actions affected me. The brazen confidence that, once again, there would be no consequences for her behavior. This wasn't just about the $15,000. This was about breaking a lifelong pattern of enablement and denial. This was about finally establishing that my boundaries mattered, that my financial security was not a resource for Brooke to plunder whenever she wanted something she hadn't earned. I spent the week preparing for their return. According to the flight information I had found in my credit card transactions, Brooke and Olivia would be arriving back in Boston the following Sunday. I knew my parents would welcome them home, probably with celebration rather than confrontation. I had no doubt that Brooke had spun an elaborate story to explain their luxury vacation, one my parents were all too willing to believe. But this time would be different. This time, I had evidence no one could deny. This time, I was ready to break the cycle, regardless of the cost to our family dynamics. As Sunday approached, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The stage was set for a family reckoning unlike anything we had experienced before. Sunday arrived with a sense of inevitable tension. I had learned, through family text messages deliberately excluding me, that my parents were hosting a welcome home dinner for Brooke and Olivia. The exclusion was telling. They knew a confrontation was coming and were attempting to control the narrative by keeping me away. I dressed carefully that evening, choosing a professional black dress and minimal jewelry. This wasn't a social call. It was a reckoning. I packed my evidence folder into my leather portfolio and drove the familiar route to my childhood home, my heart pounding with each mile. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed several cars already parked. Family members were gathered, eager to hear about the exciting Tokyo adventure. Perfect. An audience would make it harder for my parents to dismiss the evidence I was about to present. I rang the doorbell rather than using my key, consciously positioning myself as a visitor rather than family. My mother answered, her smile faltering when she saw me. "Hazel, we weren't expecting you," she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't an oversight. "I wouldn't miss Brooke's homecoming," I replied evenly, stepping past her into the foyer. The dining room was filled with family. Aunt Susan and her husband, Uncle Robert and his wife, my grandparents, and several cousins, including Olivia's parents. At the center of attention was Brooke, animated and glowing as she distributed small gifts from Japan. Olivia sat beside her, occasionally adding details to Brooke's dramatic retelling of their adventures. Everyone fell silent when I entered. Brooke froze mid-sentence, a Japanese fan clutched in her hand. For a fraction of a second, genuine fear flashed across her face before she composed herself into a bright smile. "Hazel," she exclaimed with forced enthusiasm. "I didn't know you were coming. Look what I brought you." She reached for a small package on the table, but I remained standing in the doorway, portfolio clutched in my hand. "How was Tokyo?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. $15,000 worth of luxury must have been quite the experience. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. My father stood from his chair at the head of the table. "Hazel, if you've come to cause a scene, perhaps we should talk privately," he suggested, his tone carrying a warning. "Actually, Dad, I think the family should hear this," I replied. "Since most of them already know about my ridiculous accusation, they should also hear the evidence." Brooke laughed nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "We won this trip in an online contest. Tell her, Olivia." Olivia nodded too quickly, her eyes darting around the room. "Yeah. Brooke entered this travel contest thing, and they picked her entry. Super lucky." My mother stepped forward, placing herself slightly between me and Brooke in an instinctively protective gesture. "Let's all calm down," she suggested. "Brooke and Olivia just got back from a long flight. They're tired. This isn't the time for whatever misunderstanding you're still upset about, Hazel." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling theft and fraud now?" Brooke stood up, her expression transforming into one of wounded innocence. Her eyes began to glisten with tears that could be summoned at will, a talent she had perfected since childhood. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said tremulously. "It really hurt that you'd accuse me of something so awful. I would never steal from you. You're my sister." Several family members murmured sympathetically, giving me disapproving glances. Aunt Susan put her arm around Brooke supportively. Uncle Robert shook his head, as if disappointed in my behavior. My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Hazel. I won't have you coming into our home and attacking your sister with these baseless accusations. If you're having financial problems, we can discuss that privately, but don't blame Brooke for your issues." "Baseless?" I echoed, unable to believe what I was hearing, despite having expected exactly this response. "The police and the bank don't seem to think they're baseless, Dad." Brooke began to cry in earnest now, burying her face in our mother's shoulder. "The perfect victim." "Stop pretending, Hazel," my father said, his voice hard with finality. "She would never touch your money. This isn't the first time you've made up stories for attention." My mother looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. "Maybe you should talk to someone professional," she suggested quietly. "These delusions aren't healthy." I stood frozen, the full weight of my isolation crashing down on me. Here I was, the victim of a serious crime committed by my own sister, being treated as though I was mentally unstable for stating the truth. The injustice of it was breathtaking. In that moment, memories cascaded through my mind with painful clarity, Brooke breaking my treasured music box at age 6 and my parents telling me to share better. Brooke borrowing my new sweater in high school and returning it stained, with my mother suggesting I shouldn't have clothes too nice to be ruined. Brooke copying my college essay, and my father praising her creativity rather than addressing the plagiarism. A lifetime of being gaslit about my own reality. A lifetime of adjusting my expectations to accommodate Brooke's behavior. A lifetime of being told that my boundaries were the problem, not her violations of them. Something crystallized inside me in that moment. An absolute clarity about the pattern we had been locked in for decades, and my role in maintaining it. By continuing to doubt myself, by seeking validation from people committed to denying reality, I had been complicit in my own diminishment. No more. I felt a strange calm settle over me, replacing the anxiety and anger that had driven me for the past week. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of my relatives, their discomfort, their judgment, their unwillingness to consider that the family narrative might be built on lies. None of it could touch me anymore. I smiled. The unexpected expression caught everyone off guard, including Brooke, whose tears said quietly. Officer Garcia took my sister aside, speaking to her in low, serious tones about the process ahead, while my mother wept silently at the table. The family dinner had transformed into a crime scene. The welcome home celebration into the beginning of legal proceedings that would change all our lives. As Officer Garcia finished taking Brooke's statement, my sister fixed me with a look of pure hatred. "I hope you're happy now," she spat. "Ruining my life over money. Is that all I am to you? A dollar amount." I met her gaze calmly. "This isn't about money, Brooke. This is about consequences. You've never had them, and it's damaged you. Maybe this will finally help you grow up." In the days that followed, my parents scrambled to contain the damage. They offered to pay the entire amount immediately if I would drop the charges. They brought in family friends who were lawyers to discuss alternatives to prosecution. They appealed to my sense of family loyalty, to my compassion, to my concern for Brooke's future. But I remained firm. This was a felony theft. The amount was significant. The violation of trust was profound. And most importantly, the pattern needed to be broken for everyone's sake, including Brooke's. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, seemed to agree when the case finally reached her courtroom. She ordered full restitution of the $15,000, 2 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service for Brooke. The felony charge would remain on her record, a permanent reminder of the night she crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. As we left the courthouse, my father placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of support that came far too late, but that I accepted nonetheless. "I think we failed you both," he said quietly, in very different ways. It was the closest he would come to an apology, but it was a start. The 6 months following Brooke's conviction were a period of profound change for our entire family. The immediate aftermath was painful and chaotic, with my parents still desperately trying to shield Brooke from the full impact of her actions. They offered to pay her restitution, which I refused. They tried to find loopholes in her probation requirements, which I opposed. They even suggested family therapy where I could work through my anger, as if my emotions were the problem rather than Brooke's actions. I established firm boundaries for the first time in my life. I would not attend family gatherings where Brooke's behavior was excused or minimized. I would not participate in conversations that gaslit my experience. I would not pretend that what happened was a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. These boundaries were met with resistance at first. My mother accused me of being unforgiving. My father suggested I was punishing the whole family for Brooke's mistake. Extended relatives urged me to move on for family peace. But I held firm, and slowly, a new family dynamic began to emerge from the ashes of the old one. With the case concluded and her legal obligations clear, Brooke faced real consequences for perhaps the first time. The job opportunity she had been pursuing fell through when her background check revealed the fresh felony conviction. Our parents, finally recognizing the damage their enabling had caused, established their own boundaries. Brooke would need to find employment and support herself. They would not provide financial assistance beyond helping with her initial restitution payment, which she would repay them over time. For someone who had always been rescued, these new expectations were a harsh awakening. Brooke cycled through familiar patterns, denial, blame, self-pity, but found that they no longer worked. Reality had finally caught up with her. Olivia, perhaps the least culpable player in the drama, made genuine efforts to make amends. She returned all the items purchased with my stolen card and wrote me a heartfelt letter of apology. "I didn't know it was stolen money, but I should have questioned where it all came from," she wrote. "I'm sorry I was a part of hurting you. I'm trying to be more thoughtful about the choices I make and the people I trust." I accepted her apology and even met her for coffee occasionally. Her remorse seemed genuine, and I saw no reason to punish her permanently for Brooke's manipulation. My own healing process was complex and nonlinear. I started therapy to address not just the theft itself, but the lifetime of family dynamics that had led to it. Through weekly sessions, I began to understand how I had internalized the belief that my needs and boundaries were less important than Brooke's feelings. I learned to recognize the subtle ways I had been trained to doubt my own perceptions when they conflicted with a family narrative. The support group for victims of family financial abuse that my therapist recommended was particularly helpful. Hearing other stories of betrayal by those who should have protected them helped me feel less alone. More importantly, witnessing those further along in their healing journey gave me hope that I could rebuild my sense of security and trust. My friendship with Stephanie deepened through this period. She had stood by me when others doubted, offering practical help and emotional support without judgment. We began a tradition of Sunday brunches, creating a new ritual to replace the family dinners that had once filled that time slot. "Your boundaries aren't just for you," she told me during one of these brunches. "They're actually a gift to Brooke, too, even if she can't see it yet." Real love sometimes means letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. Professionally, I channeled my experience into a new focus. After securing a full refund from my credit card company, I developed a financial literacy presentation for my firm's community outreach program, with special emphasis on protecting oneself.